got someone whose high school class had 7 people in it. He took 3 years of engineering undergrad before he decided he didn't want to be an engineer. His hobby is attempting to do jumps and guitar flips while playing Guitar Hero World Tour and hopes to grow up to be a Toys R Us kid. Matthias Shapiro, I once was blind.
My name is Matthias Shapiro, and this is I Once Was Blind, Building an Information Visualization That Means Something. Now, I love this topic because we've got these computers that bring in all sorts of information, all sorts of knowledge, but there's a problem with knowledge. It's that knowledge does not actually mean understanding intuitively. This is the bailout bill. It's basically a big list of who gets how much money, but can you tell me how much we're spending on roads and bridges? I'll give you a hint. It's right there. Tons of information and absolutely no understanding. But if we turn this into a visualization, all of a sudden we can see, it's up there in the corner, it's $30 billion, but we can see how much it is in terms of transportation infrastructure and in terms of the bailout as a whole. All of a sudden, all this information suddenly becomes understanding. So, how can we do this kind of thing ourselves? Well, the first step is to ask a specific question. We want our question to be able to tell a story. The human mind can understand stories a lot better than anything else. And so we want that story to be something like, how many men did Napoleon lose on his march to Moscow? Which is answered with this graphic. We've got the brown line showing how many he started out with. He loses them there. He loses them back. I could give you the numbers, but it wouldn't make quite the impact. With the visualization, we see the scope of the losses. So the next step is to start gathering information. These are all great places to get some information, but you want to remember that if the information you're gathering isn't telling your story, then it's not really that useful to you. As a rule of thumb, I like to stick to 3 dimensions of information. We see in 3 dimensions, and we also understand information in smaller bits. When we gather more than we need, we run the risk of putting unnecessary details in the story we're trying to tell. Once we have our information, then we apply a metric. A metric is basically taking one piece of data and applying it to some sort of visual dimension. This is a basic size metric where we have bigger numbers represented by larger circles. In the next slide, we have Edgar Allan Poe's The Raven visualized using a program called Wordle, where the common words show up more frequently. Size is really intuitive for people to understand, but be careful. If you've ever put information in a bar graph and no one understood it, you're using the size metric because you thought it meant everything. Color is great for enormous sets of data. It gives a good impression, and it helps us to see gradations of information as they move along. If we apply this to something like the stock market, it really doesn't even need any explanation. It was a bad day. We can see that healthcare didn't do too bad, and we've got a couple of outliers, but really, no one doesn't understand this graph. Okay, the next metric is location. If you've ever seen a map, you've seen a location metric. If you've ever picked a seat on an airplane, you've seen a location metric. This is a metric of this room with a little social commentary at the bottom. It was really, really late. This is a visualization of all of the flight patterns in a single day. Because we're using location, we can see hubs. We can see, oh, there's a lot more flight in the east, flight density in the east than there is in the west, that kind of thing. Then we have networks. Networks are great for binary data. Either you're connected to Kevin Bacon or you're not connected to Kevin Bacon. Be careful with network visualizations, because if you get more than 100 or 200, it starts to just become kind of a mess. This is a visualization of my Facebook friends, as a matter of fact. As my friends are connected to each other, you see higher density, very closely connected thing over there. Yeah, isn't that great? They actually correspond pretty well to different parts of my life. A time metric, if you've ever seen a timeline like this, or an animation, is basically just time mapped to the time that you're living in, usually sped up or slowed down. This next slide is a visualization of how many people named their child Matthew. We see it wasn't all that popular in the first part of the century, and then it takes a huge spike in the 70s and 80s, which is why I stopped calling myself Matt and started calling myself Matthias in college. But we're going to want to remember that through all of this, we want to tell a story. So how much is $1 trillion? Here's a story about that. Well, there's $100, and if we package these up into a little something we can fit in our pocket, we have $10,000. And if we grab enough of those and throw it into my gym bag, we have $1 million. If we get enough of those, we need a forklift. We have $100 million. And if we have enough of those to fill a small storage area, we have $1 billion. And $1 billion here and $1 billion there, and pretty soon we're talking about some real money. That's $1 trillion. Notice that the pallets are double stacked. Thanks for your time. For more on visualizations, visit my blog, designerwpf.com.
Matthias, very nice.